Well, hello everyone. Janice Nelson's here again from Birth and Beyond. And today I would like to introduce my guest, Miss LaShondra Lester. I'm going to give you a little bit about her bio. LaShondra Lester is a passionate advocate for strong families and good mental health care. She holds a degree in psychology and is pursuing her master's degree in marriage and family counseling. Being involved in couple and family work for over 25 years, Lysandra Creed is when the family is strong and healthy, every aspect of society improves. Lysandra has been married to Raymond for over 26 years, and they are proud parents of five sons: Krishan, Jordan, Jalen, Ryan, and Jonathan. In her spare time, she likes to read, shop, host friends and families, and encourage and support worthy causes and ministry. On today, we will be actually talking about mental health and the importance of mental health. During this time that we're in, with dealing with the pandemic and lockdowns and isolations and things of that nature, we're finding more and more conversations about mental health. And also, with it being the month of May, which is a month dedicated to mental health, we thought this would be a great time to have this discussion. Mental health is something that we both have had to think about and deal with, and figure out our best ways of handling different things. I have had experiences with um, taking care of and noticing how important my mental health is, and how if we don't acknowledge it or take times to examine it, then it could get away from us. And then we'll find ourselves in stressful situation, depressing situation, feeling hopelessness, or sometimes in suicidal thoughts. And so this is why I felt like this was a good time to talk about this topic, because it's a lot of people dealing with it, stressing out about work, stressing out about finances, family members dying, not able to be around family members in their last days. And even though we're talking about our physical health and trying to stay healthy physically, our mental health is just as important. So I am going to start our conversation off with actual question.
Okay.
And my first question is, if you was to define mental health, what would be your definition?
hmm So it's funny because the correlations between mental health and physical health are pretty much the same. When you think of somebody who's physically healthy, you think about somebody who is free from disease. They are able to move their body around. They're able to do the normal daily activities that everybody is usually a part of. They're able to do that. And they're able to do that with relatively less effort. So when you think about mental health is that same level of well-being. It's cognitive, emotional, and social well-being. It's being able to handle the stresses and strains of life with relative ease. And there's no disease or defects or disorders in the mind or in the psyche. So that's how we define mental health.
Okay, that's actually very good definitions and a great picture into how to think about mental health and put mental health into perspective. So what does it look like? If we were to um, give a example of what mental health looks like, what would that look like?
So I would say if you think about um, the stresses and strains of life, the everyday problem situations, a person who has good mental health is going to be able to, within reason, right? Within reason, and reason is relative with most people, but within reason, they'll be able to navigate, daily life. They'll be able to navigate stresses and strains in life. They'll be able to navigate problems. They'll be able to find solutions for problems. They'll be able to engage socially with other people. They'll be able to regulate their emotions. They'll be able to handle, even very difficult situations or grieving situations, loss situations. Um, it doesn't mean that somebody won't be affected by those things, but it does mean that they'll be able to process that cognitively, emotionally, socially, and psychically. Yeah, so that's what mental health kind of looks like.
I like how you pointed out they'll be able to navigate because with life there comes stress, there comes stressors and unexpected things that happen, but being able to navigate through them in a positive way, or a healthier version. Because sometimes when we think positive, we think good,
Right,
but it's not necessarily good. It's just that
right,
you're able to handle the situation in a healthy way.
right,
Oh,
right. I'm glad you pointed that out, Janice, because positive doesn't always mean good. Positive is just moving in a forward direction, right? Not retreating, not regressing. So it doesn't necessarily mean good. It just means it's healthy. It's navigating that in a way that helps you to not stay stuck.
okay, that's good, and it's good also to. I would think that when you're in a tough situation, to just kind of sit down and think about how you're processing things, and try to be in the moment of your emotions, of
Mm-hmm.
what's going on during
Yeah,
that time, and
yeah,
that's what can help you move forward positively.
absolutely.
Because I think sometimes we get so stuck where something dramatic happened or something stressful happened, and we don't allow ourselves to feel in that moment, and we just keep moving, and then something small trigger that, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll be wondering why we're at where we're at.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Um, so why is our mental health important?
Mhm. Um, Again, I like to tie these analogies together just to create a picture of understanding how the physical and the mental are so tied together. So when you think about a person who is unhealthy physically for whatever reason, maybe they have some type of disorder or disease, maybe they have a physical limitation or whatever, that person doesn't move through life. There are so many adjustments that they have to make just to move through life. If they have some type of dietary disease, there are certain things that they can't eat, or they have to eat certain things. If they have physical limitations, they may need help with mobility. They may need assistance with that. There are a lot of things that they can't move through life what we would call regular. And I'm really quoting that regular way, but just being able to do that. When your mental health is affected, it really affects every aspect of your life. It can affect, your job performance. It can affect relationships. It can affect how you see yourself. It can affect your eating habits. It really can affect every area of your life. You can become isolated. You can become withdrawn. You can have issues with aggression. There's just a lot of issues that you can have when your mental health is not, where it needs to be. And so it's important for us because we are our minds. Our minds tell us to do everything that we do. We have thoughts and we have wills and we have processing. And so our mind tells us to do everything. If you want to get up and go to the other side of the room, your mind is helping you make that decision, right? If you choose to go to sleep, or if you want to get something to eat, like all of that is happening in your mind, your thought processes. And so when your thought processes are not in sync, when they're not lining up, when they are distracted or distorted, or disillusioned, any of those things can affect every aspect of your life. So it's very important to have good mental health.
Okay, that's good. I have actually, I guess, two questions. Um, so I like when you gave the example of when we're unhealthy physically, what we eat can impact our health. So what we eat mentally cannot impact our mental health. And what would that look like, eating something unhealthy that can impact us mentally?
Mhm. So one of the things that I am really interested in is something called emotion regulation. Um, and what that simply is being able to experience the various emotions and and to feel them and to be able to say, what am I going to do with these emotions, right? So when you can't process your emotions and you receive information. Say, for instance, if somebody has an anger problem, and I'm just kind of going into examples right now, but for instance, somebody has an anger problem and you receive information from somebody that may be critical. If you don't know how to process your emotions with that, you're going to become aggressive or combative, right? Because you're taking something in that is not necessarily healthy or unhealthy, but because you have an issue with processing, you take that information and you move it into and you escalate it, right? Some of the things that we actually take in that are negative are have a lot to do with where we are in society today. Just the proliferation of social media and the internet, we're getting a lot of information that's not always good to us. And I'll just give you one quick example about that. With all of the COVID-19 stuff that's happening, it's important for us to be informed and be aware, right? But taking in too much of that information can actually cause mental health problems. It'll start exciting fear and anxiety and panic and worry, because you're hearing these stories and you're getting these numbers and you're feeling overwhelmed by what you're taking in, and so it starts to cause panic. And so what we have done in our house is like we do a check-in every couple of days to just make sure we know what's going on so that we can know what's going on in our area and we can make proper decisions about what we're doing. We want to know the guidelines, so we'll make sure we're following them. But then after that, it's like, okay, cut it off. Because we don't need to hear about how many people have died, and we don't need, because it's really putting you in a situation where there's literally nothing you can do about that,
Right.
right? And so as human beings, we always want to find solutions. We want to fix stuff. But when you hear, 16,000 people died, it's like, what do I do with that? What
Right.
do I do with that? And then now I'm afraid. Now I'm afraid I'm going to be next. I'm going to be the next one. And so that anxiety, that panic, that worry starts, sending off signals to your mind, and you just keep dealing with that. And so, yeah, just taking in information from a lot of sources and not being able to disseminate that information and process it and be able to come to healthy conclusions, that impacts your mental health.
Yeah, I agree. What we've done here was, like, I just listen to the news in the morning, and it's really just to kind of get an idea of what the weather is going to be like. Um, and as you said, updates, because in this pandemic, it seems like daily there's new rules, new regulations, new restrictions, and things of
Yeah.
that nature. So it's like you almost, have to. Because I remember my father texted me one time. He said, "Did you hear this?" And I'm like, "No, I hadn't heard this." He's like, "You ain't been watching the news." And I'm like, "No, I really haven't been watching the news.
Try not
That
to.
was on purpose."
Try not to.
Right. It's like I want to, as you said, stay on top of things and be aware
Mhm.
of what's going on, but at the same time, not constantly fill my mind with all the negative numbers and thoughts and things of that, nature, so that I want, subconsciously, and that's another thing, subconsciously store stuff that can manifest. And I don't even know why. It's because it's subconsciously back there, you know,
Mhm.
and it's because I fed myself these things,
Right.
and now
Exactly.
it's beginning to manifest.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly.
so my other question was, it had to be, oh, so physical health and mental health. What is the coordination? How much does our mental health impact our physical health?
Hmm. That's an awesome question because I don't think that you can really separate mental health from physical health.
Mm.
I don't think you can really separate the two. You can have poor physical health, but great mental health. I was watching a video recently of a quadriplegic, this young man who had no use of his limbs. And he kept referring to the fact that his life still has purpose, his life still has meaning, even though he can't physically do what he needs to do with his body. And I thought that's remarkable,
Mm.
because it really becomes like this cliche kind of a term, mind over matter, so to speak. And so they are interrelated. The physical uh, part is our bodies get us through life. Like they're the vehicle that gets us through life, Mike. But the mind is the driver.
Mm.
The mind is what drives us through life. It helps us to get where we're going. The body is just the vehicle. And so the fact that your mental health can impact your physical health is just been heavily researched. Okay, from obesity issues to self harm to all of these things that hyperventilation and heart issues have to do with mental health, the stressors of life. Some of those things impact your physical health. And so I don't think there's really a way that you can separate the two. But just know that the correlations exist because the physical health uh, impacts the mental as well. I remember recently a woman that I knew, she had some physical problems, and the physical problems that she was dealing with cancer and just some other things that were going on in her body. And this normally kind-hearted, warm, loving, and engaging lady, she began to become mean and unresponsive and aggressive, because what was happening in her physical body started to impact her mind. She started to become feel purposeless. She started to think that her life didn't have any meaning. She was tired of dealing with all of the doctor's problems and all of the doctor's appointments and all of that stuff. And so it started to impact her mentally. She started to just wear down to eventually this wonderful woman passed away. And so it was really, really kind of sad to see that, because there's no way you separate the body from the mind.
And that's powerful. And it's kind of interesting how it appears in our medical field, we're just now putting the two back together.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like for years we separated the physical body from the mental body, and
Mm-hmm.
we've been doing so much work on the physical body that we forgot about the mental body. But
Mm-hmm.
seeing that there are so many things now, as unfortunately, like killings and mass killings and things of that nature, that have been correlated with mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
That now we are actually putting a spotlight back on how important our mental state, is. And I like how you said that it's one vehicle. It's like almost taking the head off the body. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we've done that. We detached the head from the
Yeah.
body. And now we're putting the head back onto the body,
Yeah.
and that, hey, if this ain't working right, then none of this is working right. And those
Exactly.
are two great examples of how you had someone who physically couldn't do anything, but mentally felt as if, he still had more to give, and most likely had gave a lot more in life because of his mental state. And
Mm-hmm.
had a lady who physically body was going through things, but then her mind, and that ended up unfortunately in the death of her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's also just shows how important our mind and our body works.
Yeah.
Um, so thinking about that, what are red flags? What are things that we can see, or measuring tools that we can use to begin to identify when our mental state isn't as healthy as it should be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, Denise. So, some of the red flags that you will kind of see in yourself individually um, will have to do with how you normally would process things. So, if you are normally an extroverted person, normally, if you're normally an extroverted person, and you find yourself starting to withdraw from social situations and settings, you might want to understand or kind of think about, just give some thought to what is going on with me internally. Is there a reason why I'm withdrawing from these situations? Is there any danger present in these situations? Or is it just I'm not really, I can't engage? That would be one flag. If your eating habits change drastically, that could be a red flag. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is a problem, but it's something that you might want to take a look at. If you are overeating, people call it emotional eating. Well, that's a real thing. If you're overeating, or if you're under eating, if you're going into starvation mode, you might want to take a look at what's going on with you mentally. If you find yourself becoming very aggressive, and you're normally not an aggressive person. You're normally kind of passive and kind of, go with the flow. But you notice yourself starting to become aggressive. You might want to take a look at, this is a red flag. Maybe I'm not processing. Maybe I'm trying to protect myself from something.
Mhm.
You may not know what that something is right now, but you may be trying to subconsciously, we talked about that, protect yourself from something. Some of the red flags are, if you become very despondent, maybe crying a lot, um, very, very emotionally sensitive in various situations of which there is no need for you to be emotionally sensitive or to that degree. You might want to kind of look at do a mental health check. What's going on with me? What am I really feeling in this moment? And obviously, drug and alcohol abuse. You might want to, people say, well, you medicate yourself, medicating because there's something going on. So if you're abusing substances, you might want to think about what's going on with me mentally. And there are just so many because they're unique to the individual. But those are some of the ones that you kind of start asking, like, what is going on with me?
Okay. So, all right. I am an individual who have noticed some red flags. I've noticed that maybe um, I'm a little bit more curt than normal, or maybe I'm eating more sweets than I normally eat, or things of that nature. So I'm noticing my behavior is changing. It's not normal. Now, what do I do? Like I'm like, okay, something is not right. Something is off. Sometimes people can identify right away what is stressing them out or what's causing this erratic behavior, but then sometimes we don't. And if we do or we don't know what the vehicle behind the behavior change, what steps, like if I'm physically not feeling well, I know I can either go to the emergency room or I can go make an appointment with my doctor, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
But what is my next step mentally? If I'm noticing that something is not right about me mentally, what is my next step?
Hmm. So the correlations keep going with the mental and the physical health. So if you were actually physically something was going on, you would reach out to a doctor. You would do the same thing mentally. Okay, so you would either reach out to a mental health professional, or even before you go to that point, if you actually have some people that you trust in your life,
Mhm.
that you can say, okay, hey, I'm reaching out to you because I'm feeling some kind of way. I don't know what's going on with me. I'm noticing this, that, and that. Have you noticed any things differently about my behavior? Have you been observing some triggers or some things that have been going on? Sometimes, if you kind of put that out there to your friends or loved ones, they can kind of start saying, you know what, ever since X happened, I've noticed that you've been this way. And so sometimes just even that initial reaching out to people that are in your circle might be able to help you to get to that point. But then obviously, if you're noticing that these symptoms that you're experiencing are not only are you doing it, but they're causing you some kind of discomfort or angst or anguish or something like that, then you're going to want to reach out to a mental health professional to say, you know what, this is, because it's all, prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it's always good to just, just stick your hand out there and reach out there for some help and say, you know what, this may be nothing, but I noticed this is going on about me, and I don't really know where this is all coming from. And somebody will able to help you to process, maybe kind of regress, go back to when you notice these things happening, and kind of figure out what was happening around in your world when these things started happening. If this change happened suddenly and you just, it seemed to have come out of nowhere. Usually if something happened, it never comes from out of nowhere. There's always some kind of precipitating event that would have brought that on, but you may be unaware of what that is. And so just opening up, having dialogue, talking to a mental health professional or to friends and family can kind of open your eyes and clear your vision a little bit to help you to identify where this is coming
Okay, so how do I get rid of the myth of not sharing my business?
from.
I mean, everybody don't need to know my business. I don't need
Yeah.
no therapist. Don't need nobody, no shrink in my head. I mean,
Yes.
so, how do we get past cultural barriers,
Hmm.
with feeling as if we don't need a therapist. We don't need a counselor. We don't need, we go pray. That's what we do. We just, fall on your knees,
Yep.
get in your prayer closet,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
work
Jesus gonna
this
work
out.
it out.
Right.
Yes, yes, yes. And he does work it out. You bring up a great point, because culturally, and it's not just in the African American community,
Right.
um, pretty much any minority ethnicity generally has this barrier to mental health profession. You see it in Asian cultures, you see it in African American cultures, pretty much any minority you would see this in Hispanic cultures. We typically are reluctant to share our business because that's been ingrained in us since, for generations, that you don't, share personal problems with anybody outside your family. And so it is a big obstacle that we are overcome. But thankfully, we are moving in a great direction with this. Just from advocacy and education, we're reaching out to faith communities. We're reaching out into community centers of saying, hey, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. And when you're not okay, it's perfectly okay to get some help.
Exactly.
And so just with education, with sensitivity, right? In the mental health community, being sensitive of the fact that it's very hard for people to reach out for help, especially in religious communities. That's a big one, where it's really about, just pray or go to a pastor. And many of them are not equipped to handle the kinds of things that we're seeing in today. And honestly, we are in a new way of living. Culturally, we are in a different space of time, where the things that maybe generations ago did not have to deal with, we're dealing with some of those things now, and we don't really know how to navigate that. And so just being mindful of the fact that we're encouraging the dialogue between faith communities and mental health professionals. We're being more vocal about what we actually have to offer. And some people erroneously think that when you see a mental health professional, that something is wrong with you. And that could be nothing further from the truth. Um, and to paraphrase a scripture, the Bible says that in a multitude of counselors there is safety.
Yep.
Um, and so when we think about the fact that counselors not only diagnose disorders, but they are coaches, they are mentors, they are listeners to help bounce ideas and things off of. They give education You can sit down with a counselor and learn things that you never learned before. There are a variety of aspects to being engaged with a counselor that has nothing to do with the fact that you are wrong or something is wrong with you. And so we want to break that stigma against the fact that you can't go to see a therapist because something is wrong with you. Something is wrong with the world, and that's why we're going to always need counselors.
Right. I like how you point out you educate, because I always feel like education is key to a lot of breaking of a lot of barriers. Because another scripture, my people perish for the lack of knowledge. Like,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
so educating ministers, because a lot of people do look to their ministers and kind of um, parallel their lives off of what they minister believe. So if you can get the bishop or the pastor to embrace counseling, then he may be more of the one to encourage, his congregation, and about, hey, if you feel like you need to talk to someone, if you're feeling, because another thing with in the church realm, you know, um, because of a lot of our teachers and things of that nature, we never understood depression, and how that is. It was kind of like, Christians don't get depressed, and it's actually the farthest from the truth, because they do. So um, understanding that these things are um, doesn't make you not spiritual because you're experiencing it. It makes you human because you're experiencing it, and it's okay to get help. If you're experiencing these things. So my next question is there anything different that we should pay attention to in children versus adults? Are there different signs that should we be aware of, children versus adults? Are there different ways we should address mental issues with children versus adults?
Hmm. Absolutely. Children often can't vocalize what's actually going on with them, so you'll pay more attention to the signs than will out just come and say I'm depressed or I'm anxious or I'm fearful. So some of the physical signs that you can kind of look for in stress in children, um, bedwetting is a huge one that a lot of people miss. When children begin to wet the bed or um, continue to wet the bed well past when they should. That's a huge stress. That's a huge sign of stress. Their eating habits, when they overeat or undereat, those are huge for children. When they complain of stomach aches a lot, and they don't have any physical reason for their stomach to be hurting. You've taken them to a doctor, and the doctor doesn't find anything that would, usually stomach aches are a big one. When they want to not go to school, um, consistently don't want to go to school, there may be something there that's going on with them. When they have excessive nightmares, is usually a sign of some kind of fear of anxiety that's happening with them. Um, when they begin lying a lot, um, you notice a kid that normally just would tell the truth all the time and they begin to lie or cover up or kind of, and that, you have to balance that with, some normal childhood behaviors, that kind of, but if you're paying attention to the child and you're involved in that child's life and you notice there's this sudden change in personality, if they become more withdrawn or if they're more isolated or if they're afraid to be around people, you might want to try to find out what's going on in their lives. And like I said, children normally don't vocalize or they can't verbalize exactly what's going on with them. So you have to do a little bit more of an investigation with the child. But as long as you come along as supportive and not condemning, if you kind of come alongside them and say, I know something's going on with you, and you're not going to get in any trouble for telling me. If they feel safe, then usually they will open up. But sometimes depending on the child and depending on the extent of what's going on, you may need to have some additional help to help them process that through a counselor or a therapist, because they'll be trained with techniques like play therapy, that will help them to be able to decipher what's going on in the inner mind of the child.
So in children, how do we I feel like everything that you talked about so far was is dealing with possible stressors
Hmm.
that can take a mental effect on our children. But there's another part of mental also where there's actually some developmental issues. So how do we distinguish the two? Like even in adults and children, how do we distinguish when there's like uh, stress mental issues or there's a developmental or an imbalance in the mental area?
Yeah, yeah, it's a very tricky area to navigate, because not all children develop at the same rates and at the same times, with different things with their mental capacity. And so it can be a very tricky area to navigate. And it's important to educate yourself on the developmental stages on childhood. You know, when they hit certain benchmarks or mile markers in development. If if you're in close dialogue with their primary care physician, just understanding some benchmarks and mile marks that they should be making. But then when it comes to mental health issues, if a child is really kind of struggling in an area, just providing as much support as you can for that child. And then also, the education part is a big key in the relationship aspect. Really kind of coming alongside your child and asking those tough questions and those hard questions in a way that they can answer at their age level. Because sometimes there are developmental delays in children, and usually a psychiatric workup can kind of determine whether that's true or not. Sometimes the school counselors are able to just give baseline tests to find out where your child is developmentally and mentally. And so that's another avenue that you can kind of check with the school counselors and say, okay, I'm noticing these things in my child, and is this just a physical, or is it developmental, or is it mental? Information is key. Information is important. And the more information that you have, the better processes that you can take with your child to say, okay, oh, I need to do this or I need to do that. So education and information is very, very important. But understanding that, all children are different, and so there is no baseline for all children.
Okay. So our time is getting close to an end. Time go by so fast.
It does, doesn't it?
So in your final remarks, I was wondering what tips would you give someone during this pandemic, during this time of separation, isolation, not being able to do the norm? What are some tips that you would give them to help them stay mentally healthy?
Hmm. So the advice is first towards me because I am struggling. I am struggling. I am such a social person, and this is like really hard for me. It is hard for me. And so I know it's hard for me. And so I have to be intentional about everything I do now. I have to be intentional about understanding me, like knowing what my baseline stuff is. Okay, so how am I going to navigate if I know I'm social and I can't be social? What do I need to do? So if you are a social person and you are struggling through this pandemic, be intentional about keeping your connections, however you may be able to keep them, whether they are calling people on the phone or getting on Zoom or social media or texting or whatever you need to do. Keep your social connections strong. You may not be able to meet physically, but you can meet electronically through a bunch of a bunch of outlets. You thank God for but then you're also going to want to do some things for yourself, that self-care aspect of it, making sure that you take time to process how you feel, express how you feel, maybe journaling. Journaling may be a good idea for some at this time to just get how they're feeling out into the open. That can be a good avenue. Um, please, if you are able to, get outside and get some fresh air and sunshine in your life. That is a huge mood booster, to be able to get fresh air and sunshine on your face. Go sit outside, go stand on your deck in front of your house, in your backyard, wherever you can. Go for a drive, a 15-minute drive, whatever it is that you can do to get outside, please. That's one of the greatest ones that you can. And then eating right, eating healthy. I've been hearing a lot of people who are just like, I'm just eating whatever. I'm going to the refrigerator. Okay, that's great. I get that part of that. But make sure that you stock your refrigerator and your pantry with fresh fruits and vegetables, because the healthier you are physically, the better you're going to be mentally. So that's a good thing. And this is a good time to um, take an opportunity to do something that maybe you've done. Maybe there's this book that you've been wanting to read for the longest time, and you never had the time to read that book. Go ahead, read that book. Go ahead and watch that movie. And I'm all for, okay, if you really just need to binge watch Netflix, go ahead. Go ahead and binge watch Netflix right now. Because it's going to take your mind, it's going to give your mind something else to think about and process, except, exactly what we're going on. But then if you find that you are really struggling, like it's just really, you've done the Netflix, you ate the healthy foods, you have gone for a walk every day, sometimes you're still struggling, by all means, reach out to somebody, talk to a friend, talk to a loved one, call a pastor, call a counselor, reach out to someone. Don't go through this alone. We are not alone. That's the biggest thing that we need to understand. We are socially distant, but we're not emotionally distant. We need to connect. We need each other. And so reach out to somebody if you're really struggling during this pandemic. And then lastly, I would say, keep hope alive, in quotes to Jesse Jackson. Keep hope alive. Like, just know that where we are right now is not where we're going to be eternally. This is for a moment, and looking forward to the things that you're going to do when this is over is kind of like a motivating factor to keep you saying, okay, well, I can go one more day, because when this is over, I'm going to do this. And when this is over, I'm going to do this. When you take away a person's hope, you take away a person's life. So if you can instill hope in each other and find some hope for yourself, then you'll be able to make better decisions as we're, coming through wherever we are in this pandemic right now.
Those are some great tips. I have been trying to utilize outdoors. I love sunlight. So,
Mm-hmm.
going outside, just standing in the sun just makes my day because I just love the sunlight.
Something as simple as that, but we don't really, I mean, they're telling us to stay at home, but stay at home doesn't mean stay in the home. You actually got to get out of it. You actually have to get out of it sometimes, and it is the vitamin D, the sunshine, the fresh air, breathing, in your home. Open the windows in your house on days when you can. Like, all of these things are proven to be natural mood boosters, and so when we do that, I mean, it just naturally makes us feel better.
Yeah, it does. This has been a very educational and informative conversation, and I am so glad that you decided to join with me on this topic. So, can you share with the audience how they can reach you?
Okay. So I am on all social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LaShondra Lester. You can find me on all of those. I do have a YouTube channel. and it's under the same name, LaShondra Lester. I will be changing that over soon, and it's going to be Lady Mama Girl. It's and you'll understand why when that switches over. But it's gonna. But right now, it's under LaShondra Lester on YouTube. And you can also reach me by email at ladymamagirl@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Once again, I am Janice Nelson, and I am the founder of Birth and Beyond. That is my YouTube channel. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any other topics, or if you would like for me to come back with Miss Lester and ask her more questions or anything of that nature, if you would like for us to do a live where you can actually talk to her live, please let us know. Please leave some comments. You can also email me at Janice Nelson. That's JANIECE Nelson, NELSON, the number 8 at gmail.com. Until next time, have a great day.
Bye, everybody.